I don't know about this second.
Wow.
Okay, so let's get started. We'll watch this video first. It's actually chapter 11. It's the one I had so much difficulty last week trying to show. So I downloaded it to a flash drive. So we'll watch it real quick and then we'll jump right into chapter 12.
Did I even do chapter 12?
We're doing that today.
But I mean, did I do it?
Oh,
Right up there. It's about a huge tower. The Tower of Babel is one of the most famous stories of the Bible. Right up there in Solomon's Temple. It's about a huge tower that people tried to build up to the heavens. But even though they had big dreams, things didn't go as planned because God wasn't happy with their project. Why did God step in? And did the tower really get knocked down? Let's dive into the story and see what happened. Subscribe to our channel if you want to hear more stories like this one. After the great flood, the sons of Noah and their wives began to repopulate the earth. And among their descendants was a mighty man, a leader among men, and a fierce hunter before the Lord. His name was Nimrod, and he was the great-grandson of Noah through his son Ham and Ham's son Cush. And the beginnings of his kingdom included Babel in the land of Shinar. At that time, the people of the earth spoke one language. And as it came to pass, they traveled from the east and found a plain in the land of Shinar and settled there. In that place, the people wanted to build a huge tower reaching the sky. They hoped this would make them famous and keep them together, not spread out. But God didn't like their big plans and pride. So he mixed up their languages, making it hard for them to talk to each other. This caused them to scatter everywhere, and they couldn't finish the tower. So that spot got the name Babel, meaning confusion. The Tower of Babel was like a pyramid made of mud bricks. These kinds of structures, called ziggurats, were linked to gods worshipped by the Babylonians and Marduk. While Marduk's fame came later, ziggurats were built long before the Tower of Babel. The people of Shinar wanted to reach the sky with this tower, so it must have been very tall. We don't know how much they built before God stopped them. The construction of the city would have halted when the confusion of languages occurred, as many inhabitants would have left. However, when the population grew again, building resumed, making Babylon the largest city in the known world at that time. Despite talk of its destruction, the tower remained standing. Over time, when it fell into disrepair, energetic Babylonian kings were restored. Alexander and Philip of Macedon even planned to rebuild the temple connected to it. However, Alexander's death and Philip's inability to rule effectively ended his plans. Consequently, the tower remained unrepaired. It was said to be extremely tall, with one-third sinking into the ground, another third destroyed by fire, and the remaining third standing until Babylon's destruction. But where exactly was the Tower of Babel located? But we can't pinpoint the exact spot. It's likely the Tower of Babel stood where Babylon would be, possibly in modern-day Iraq. This makes sense because of its ziggurat shape, similar to other structures in the area. Back then, Babylon was different from the city we know later. It was already a place of trouble and bad behavior. That's why the Bible talks so harshly about it in Revelation. Babylon shows up a lot in the Bible. First, when people rebelled against God after the flood, instead of spreading out as God said, they built a tower to heaven as a challenge. Later, Babylon attacks Jerusalem and appears in Revelation as a symbol of evil. Why exactly did God stop the Tower of Babel? Throughout history, many have seen the Tower of Babel story as humans trying to challenge the heavens, much like the Titans in Greek stories. Different people imagine different reasons for their actions. They are often seen as being too proud and not following God's command to spread out and fill the earth, as mentioned in Genesis 1:28. The story teaches us about the dangers of being too proud, wanting too much, and not obeying. While it's true, people can act this way, some see the the tower as just a symbol of rebellion and going too far. However, this story holds deeper meaning. When we look closely, the reasons given for the builder's actions, pride and disobedience, don't seem to fully explain things. Genesis 11:4 says, "Come, let us build ourselves a city with a tower that reaches to the heavens so that we may make a name for ourselves. Otherwise, we will be scattered over the face of the whole earth." When people make a name for themselves, it means they do something memorable that others will remember for a long time. It's about gaining honor and a good reputation. In the Old Testament, it's often talked about God making a name for himself, which means making himself well known and respected. Sometimes it's about God making someone else famous, like Abram or David. It's always seen as something good. In Genesis 11, we see people trying to make a name for themselves. However, this doesn't necessarily mean they were doing something wrong. Looking at other ancient texts like the Epic of Gilgamesh and the Epic of Etana, we find that making a name for yourself was seen as a good thing, achieved through noble actions and great achievements. In ancient times, one common way to make a name was by having children, as they would remember and honor you after you were gone. While today we might see it as egotistical, back then it was like leaving a legacy. Their desire not to scatter also doesn't seem to be a problem. Genesis 1:28 is a blessing, not a command to scatter. A blessing can't be disobeyed because it's not important. Although grammatically it's an imperative. In Hebrew, imperatives have different meanings, and in this case, it's more like giving permission to fill the earth without limits. In Genesis 11, the people don't want to spread out, but that doesn't mean they don't want to populate the earth. They're like a family who prefers to stay together. We see this same feeling in the story of Abram and Lot in Genesis 13. In Genesis 11, their reluctance to scatter makes them search for a solution, which they find in building cities. When we see that wanting to leave a legacy and preferring to stay together are common and okay, we have to rethink what this story is really about. If we only see the Tower of Babel story as a warning about pride or disobedience, we miss out on understanding more about God and how we relate to Him. Looking into ancient times can give us a fresh perspective. You remember that the tower was built like a ziggurat. Ziggurats were not built for people to ascend to heaven, but rather for the God to descend from heaven. In ancient times, ziggurats were important parts of temple complexes, built beside temples as sacred spaces for gods. They weren't built for people to go up, but for gods to come down. The tower was like a special entrance for the god to enter the temple where people worshipped. In Genesis 11, we see God coming down to the tower center, but he isn't happy. The people weren't trying to be prideful by building it. They probably thought they were honoring God by providing a way for him to come down and be worshipped. So why was God upset? And since we don't build ziggurats now, what does this story mean for us today? Here, we need to think about another aspect of ziggurats. People then believed gods needed things like food and shelter, and they thought it was their job to provide for them. That's all the gods cared about in their worship. In this ancient system, religion wasn't about beliefs or morals. It was mainly about taking care of the gods. People believed they had to provide for the gods' needs to get protection and prosperity in return. They thought if they pleased the gods, their cities would thrive. This explains why the people in Genesis 11 thought building the city with its tower would make them famous. They believed it would make the gods owe them, leading to success and fame. The issue wasn't that they wanted to be well known. It was that they were using their relationship with God to boost their own reputation. This is something we might relate to. When we build sacred places or do big projects in the church, are we doing it not to honor God, but to make ourselves look good? When God turns down their selfish plan to make him visible, the story shifts to what God does next, making a promise to Abram. What's surprising is that this promise isn't about fulfilling God's needs. Instead, God promises Abram the same things other gods offered in ancient times, like making Abram famous. But there's a big difference. This promise isn't about trading favors. It's about a new way to connect with God. While many see the stories in Genesis 1:11 as tales of failure, theologian J. Harvey Walton suggests they're about people trying different ways to bring order to their lives, like trying to be like God, starting families, building cities, or seeking God's favor. But none of these work in the end. Instead, God made humans to work with him, but they chose to try to do things on their own. Genesis 1. 11 shows these failed attempts to find order, much like Ecclesiastes shows failed attempts to find meaning. Then, Genesis introduces the covenant as the only way to bring true order. This connects Genesis 1:11 with Genesis 12:50, showing how human failures lead to the need for a covenant, a special promise from God that doesn't rely on mutual needs, but on God's plan to bring order through his people. The real problem lies in people's selfish desires, thinking they could gain something by trying to please God. But even more crucial is the realization that when people try to create order for themselves, using their own methods and for their own gain, it never works out. God provides the only way to true order, and it comes through having the right relationship with him. He's always been the source and center of order, and that won't ever change. Understanding the Tower of Babel story in its ancient context helps us see that it's not just about pride or disobedience, but about people trying to gain favor with God for their own gain. This shows us that trying to achieve success or recognition by our own efforts without considering God will ultimately fail. As followers of Jesus, we should remember that God's desire has always been to have a close relationship with us and to be present in our lives. Instead of seeking our own glory, we should focus on aligning our lives with God's plans and purposes. This means prioritizing our relationship with God, seeking his guidance in all that we do, and recognizing that true fulfillment comes from walking in step with him. Ultimately, it's about allowing God to be the center of our lives and trusting in his plans for us. Indeed, this passage reminds us that viewing our relationship with God as transactional, expecting something in return for our devotion, is not how it should be. Our faith should not be driven by the desire for personal gain, whether in this life or next. Instead, we should be motivated by the understanding that God is worthy of our commitment in every aspect of our lives. We should be constantly challenged by the fact that God doesn't need anything from us. Our gifts, attention, prayers, worship, or companionship. It's us who owe everything to him, not the other way around. Our devotion to God should be fueled by our recognition of his worthiness, rather than any expectation of what we might gain from him. Absolutely, the separation of culture can bring both order and chaos into our lives. While they can help create structure and organization, they can also cause disruption and confusion. However, we shouldn't rely solely on them to bring complete order to our lives or our world. True order and peace come from embracing the teachings and way of life of Jesus Christ. It's about surrendering our burdens and struggles to him, rather than expecting everything to be resolved according to our desires. Finding rest in order means taking on the yoke of Christ, following his guidance, and trusting in his plan for us, even when things seem uncertain or difficult. We've come to the end of this video, and if you enjoyed it, do well to click on the like and subscribe buttons. Don't forget to check other videos on. Okay. Well, whoever produced that, though, should have the background music. Man, just dial it back. It was hard for me to even hear.
And then one picture of the fire burning up the Tower of Babel. If you looked in the background, he had a perfect skyscraper. one that's used today, that goes up and it goes to a point. Yeah, you have a skyscraper back there instead of the tower.
You know, the message at the end of that video, what our goal is, doesn't matter what book we're studying. It doesn't matter where we're at in our walk. It all boils down to that. They could have added that to any study, any video that they're doing. It's that relationship that we have between God. As we learned in Ecclesiastes, you know, we have this plane of reality, but we have this, and this is what it's supposed to be, that transactional between us and God. Couple things. Last week I had mentioned that I don't remember how I mentioned it, but since I mentioned the TVs and all that from last week, we have an anonymous donor that we have two brand new 85-inch TVs that were donated to the church, and we'll endeavor to get those put up this coming week. We'll see, but soon. Yeah, maybe as soon as we can get to it. Oh, well, we get our TV back.
Okay.
Yeah, and even the video on the laptop didn't have that overwhelming background music, so we'll get rid of this thing and get our TV back with the sound bar and all. So let's see here. We should be on page 91. Just a couple, excuse me, a couple things. It says here in the beginning on page 91, chapter 12, that chapter 12 marks a turning point in Genesis. So I want to reinforce some of that. So chapters 1 through 11 recorded 19 generations, covering 2,000 plus years. Genesis 12 through the end, Genesis 12 through 39, is 350 years. There are those in even great churches, there are those professing Christians that believe that the first 12 chapters are myth and they're not real. But Genesis is not real, it's just it's hyperbole, it's a demonstration, it's not to be taken literally. I'm not one of those. You can be one if you want, and I'll still love you, but...
We'll forgive you.
Okay, yes, for sure. And so from this chapter 12 until chapter around 28, or in the next 16 or so chapters, it's all about Abram and Abraham. Abram, the name Abram, remember God changes his name. Abram means devoted father, exalted father. Abraham means the father of many nations. That's why God changed his name. Very cool. 3 times in the Bible that we trust and read, Abraham is referred to as a friend of God. How does the Bible in the New Testament refer to us and our relationship with God? Friend of God. Yeah, that's awesome. That's awesome.
Yeah, we're saints.
Yep. Okay, so next page, 92. First question. God gave Abram a command and a promise before he left Ur of the Chaldeans for Haran. Now there's 2 spelled the same, Haran the person and Haran the place. Before we answer that, just a couple things. Ur of the Chaldeans was a city prominent in its day, roughly 300,000 people. It was in present-day Iraq, Iran area, the Fertile Crescent. The principal temple in that area was not a Christian, obviously. It was a temple an idolatrous temple, and the main temple was built to a god, and the name of that god was Sin. I kid you not.
With what?
Sin. The god name is Sin. Like, I find that really interesting.
Sure was.
So we're going to look at before we answer these questions, and we should be able to answer them quickly. But if we go to Joshua 24, I'm going to read a little bit here. Joshua gathered all the tribes of Israel at Shechem.
Thank you.
And called for the elders of Israel, their heads, their judges, and their officers. They presented themselves before God. Joshua said to all the people, "This is what the Lord God of Israel says. From ancient times, your fathers lived beyond the Euphrates River, namely Terah, father of Abraham, and the father of Nahor, and they served other gods." Now, the reason I wanted to read that is we need to learn a little bit and understand a little bit about Abram's and later Abraham's history. He wasn't always a Hebrew, right? He wasn't always the father of many nations. Before that, his father took him to a place. Some of the writings even say that his father involved in himself in making trinkets and of idols and all of that. We just read it. In Joshua, it says they served other gods. It wasn't until when God revealed himself and through Abram's faith that he became Abraham and listed in Hebrews 11 in the heroes of faith, that he gave his life to Yahweh. Right? That's pretty amazing. One thing that I want to remember too, we're going to have to read it, and then we'll answer the questions. But in Genesis 11, the story actually starts a little bit earlier than chapter 12, but the very end of chapter 11, 10, 11, let's go to verse 28. We'll start in 27. Now, this is the table of nations, right? The genealogy. Now, these are the records of the generations of Terah. Terah fathered Abram, Nahor, and Haran. Okay, 3 kids. Haran died. So Abram's brother died. These are formulative events in a person's life that form their character and their mindset. So I thought it was interesting and important to note here that his brother died, and he was the father of Lot, and so Lot now is the nephew that he's now raising. Think about this: when Abraham is called to sacrifice his son. I mean, all this. What's the word I'm looking for? All of this history that God puts in people's lives make them who they are. This, to me at least, demonstrates how dramatic that moment was, even more dramatic than it would have been in just a cursory reading of this situation, knowing that he lost his brother. I don't know if any of you have lost a brother, but it could be a pretty painful situation. Anyway, so question 1, page 92. God gave Abram a command and a promise before he left Ur of the Chaldeans for Haran. What was the command that you see in Genesis 1?
Are you talking about leave your country and your people
Mm-hmm.
and go to a land that I will show you?
Yeah, exactly.
He said, I will make you a great nation.
What's the
I
name?
will bless those who bless you.
And I will
Curse those.
curse those that curse you. So
That's so true today, isn't it?
it is.
Amen.
So we didn't read that. It's a pretty short chapter, and I'm trusting that you did read it. But you brought up Genesis 12:3. I will bless those that bless thee, and I will curse those that curse thee. That's one of the reasons why, whether we as a nation should never depart from our support of Israel. Now, does that mean that it's blind support and they can do nothing wrong? No, they still do plenty wrong. So do we, as a matter of fact. But in that verse, I will bless those that bless thee. Both those words, bless and bless, are the same words. The words, I will curse those who curse thee. Two different words. The word, I will curse those. It's the word arar in Hebrew. I will arar those who kalal you. In other words, it's really interesting. God is saying, if you look at the Hebrew words, I will bless those that bless thee, and I, as God, will utterly destroy those that curse you. That's what those words mean. It's a godly, it is an ultimate judgment of the nations that come against God's chosen people.
And that's why we should really support Israel with joy and expectation. At least I feel like that way. And yet, it seems like that's kind of a worldly thing to do. I expect something back from you, God, because I donated to your cause in Israel. But no, I think it's a higher calling than that. I would hope so.
Yeah, I would hope so too.
Explain it, but he does give us the promise that if we bless Israel, he will bless us.
Yeah, we just, I heard yesterday on the news that we just sent over, they put it in tons and tons and tons of war equipment. That means bullets, rifles, pistols, the whole nine. And I was thinking, Israel can't use that much. They're not, they don't have an army that big. But I think he's planning on Israel supporting the people, not the government, but the people of Iran, so that they might be safe. Right now, they have no weapons, so they can't go out in the streets and protect themselves. So what happens? They mow them down. 32,000 people in just about a week. Kill them all, just for no reason. So I'm hoping that Israel will get those weapons into the hands of Iranian people.
Well, I think it just opens our eyes to how timely the scripture is.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, for sure. And the geopolitical climate that we find ourselves in, I'm just one person. You're all each just one person, but collectively we are the church, and as such, we serve a God who is sovereign and who hears the petitions and prayers of his kids, of which we all are. Oh, thank you, Jesus. Thank you for allowing me to be called your friend and to be called a Christian. I love you, Jesus. Thank you. So, God gave Abram a command and a promise before he left Ur of the Chaldeans for Haran. The command was to leave your country, leave your family, leave your people, leave your father's household. Isn't it interesting that he didn't say, because you're going to go here, here's where I'm taking you. It didn't have that yet. It's just go.
Wow, we have it.
So he up and went. Interestingly, though, at this point of Abram's life, he really didn't just up and go because he was a son. He went where Dad took him. And so God will use whoever he needs to use in our lives to fulfill his ultimate purpose in our life and in the lives and areas that we're living in. So his dad, they served other gods. As we go through the next chapters and we learn more about Abram and then Abraham, it's important to remember what his history was. His history, he came from a place where it was full of idolatry. His dad was even involved in it. If you look at some of the rabbinical writings, which I did, I only read a few, but they suggest that Dad even worked in the temples manufacturing and selling idols. Wow. Have you ever in your life been in a situation where your upbringing and all of a sudden now you're faced with a decision for Christ that's going to put you at opposition and at odds with your blood family? Yeah. I'm not faulting Catholics. While there can be many things that I could fault them about, Catholics, there'll be plenty of Catholics in heaven.
Yes, that's right.
I'm working on that.
But being raised in Catholicism, it was a really difficult time. When I got saved and left the Catholic Church, I was excommunicated. I was told by my family was told by the leadership in the churches, the various churches that my family went to, he's poison. Don't meet with him. Don't talk to him. Yeah. So, yes, sir.
Same with my family. When I became a Christian and I became a Jesus freak,
Jesus freak.
I prayed to every class in college, help me get the gospel to everybody in the class. And my relatives wouldn't even allow my parents to come to family reunions anymore.
Mm-hmm.
They said, we're afraid, because I led several of my cousins to Christ,
Mm-hmm.
and we're afraid about him getting in and preaching to them, and we don't understand his navigator upbringing. They thought the navigators were some religion, and they're not. All they are is just, discipleship organization. And it was so fun because 5 or 10 years later, I don't know exactly, we went to family reunions and they had me pray for the food before they ate.
Mm-hmm.
That's the difference in how God can tip it upside down.
Sure. So I don't know if it's ever appropriate for me to say who I wasn't involved with as far as them and their salvation, but I'll tell you one story. A cousin of mine, Gary, witnessed to him, prayed for him. His family then started going to the church that I was going to at the time, which was Faith Bible Chapel, and he got saved. His parents got a hold of my parents, which was my dad's sister, said, you need to keep him away from the rest of these because they're going to hell because they've left the Catholic Church. And your son is poisoning the pool. And so, yeah. Anyway, so not comparing myself at all to Abram or Abraham, only in this one very small little situation where being raised in a family and taking the step of faith because you know what God told you to do for yourself and then preach that to others, sometimes it's not always easy. chapter 1, verse 1 of chapter 12 is really the Great Commission of the Old Testament, if you want to look at it that way. Okay, so question 2. Oh, no, I'm sorry. Which one am I on? The people destroyed in the floods were noted chiefly as men of renown, and the people of Babel were destroyed for trying to make the name for themselves. According to God's promise, how was Abraham going to be different? See Genesis 12:2.
He was going to be blessed of God.
Mhm. Yeah, there, in verses 2 and 3, there's the 7 promises, right? I will, I have them written down
I'll
here.
make you a great nation.
Yeah, that's one. What are the rest?
I will bless you. I will make your name great.
Yep.
And you shall be a blessing to the United States and United States, or U.S. And I will bless those who bless you, and those who curse you I will curse.
Yeah, so those are the promises in 2 and 3.
Well, I think that the difference too is that God was going to make his name great. He was not to make his own name great.
Sure. And so we juxtapose that that right there with Babel and chapter 11, where they were endeavoring to make their name great. Well, I've said this to you before, and I love saying this because I believe with all my heart. The only goodness and greatness of Mike is the goodness and greatness of Jesus in Mike. So he'll make you great, but you are. I mentioned this last week. Kings and priests. You are great. God has called you. He has made you great because I am the righteousness of God through Jesus Christ, and greater is he that is in me than he that is in the world. And I can do all things through Christ who strengthens me. Those are promises that we should declare over our lives every single day, and, and everybody that we meet. I'm over this cold, but this lingering cough.
Yes.
How long has it been for you?
A couple months.
Just this little tickle.
Yep.
Anyway.
It's just COVID. But that's neat that it happened in Jesus' days. They came and accused Jesus, and they said, "Why are your disciples out there preaching and everything that moves?" They turned into street evangelists. And he said, "Well, if they keep quiet, the very rocks upon which you stand are going to shout." So God expects us as his children to get the gospel out and save the nations. Right. And even in the New Testament, when Jesus coming off the Mount of Olives, right before his passion. Thank you. I could not get that word. It was there. It was bouncing around. I just couldn't nail it. The Pharisees always trying to catch Jesus in something blasphemous said, "Master," mockingly, "make them stop," because they were saying, "Blessed is he that cometh in the name of the Lord." And he said, "I can make them stop, but if I do, what happens next?" What did he say? "If I make them stop, I could do that. I can make them stop talking, but if I do, the rocks will cry out." That's what you're talking about. Yeah, that's amazing. Okay. We talked about the promises in 12:2 and 3. What can we learn about Abram's character from his actions in 12:4 through 9? List the qualities you observe and how he shows them. What are some of Abram's qualities that are demonstrated in those verses?
obedience.
You respond with obedience and trust.
Obedience and what?
Trust.
Trust, absolutely.
Courage.
And what?
Courage.
Courage. Yeah, he saw the long plan, not just short-sightedness, which that's something I struggle with. Sometimes trying to balance faith over fear. If you've ever been in a trial in your life that causes fear of any kind, man, that's a struggle, trying to maintain that balance between faith and fear. I wrote a note over here somewhere that it's part of the testing. I can't find my notes, but so what else? Trust, courage. What did he do at every location? And then,
Worship God.
what did he do?
Worship God.
And
Building all.
yes, he built an altar at every location. His starting point was the Ur of the Chaldeans, then Haran, then Shechem, then Bethel and Ai. I know in BSF they did an entire section on Ai. For those that were in BSF, you probably remember that. And then to the Negev, which is Edom in the very lower part, desert, desolate. Southern Israel. It was a walk of faith.
I find it interesting that they call out God.
That they what?
I find it interesting that God calls out the fact that he took Lot with him. And that we are responsible and to care for each other, but our families and the number of people who walk away from families and children. Not supposed to do that.
Not supposed to do that. So where in the New Testament can you find that principle?
It makes me cry. Even looking for the city, which has foundation, whose architect and builder is God.
Yeah, Hebrews 11:11.
By faith.
Galatians 6 says that we are to bear one another's burdens. You know, I know you've had this experience in your own life where sometimes when you feel situations in your life about your health, your welfare, your finance, all that, when it's about you, sometimes it's a little more difficult to seek God and to ask for things. And yet when it's about someone else, isn't it amazing when God puts a certain individual on your heart at times in your life where you just can't get them out of your head? Yeah. And let's see, thinking of all the books I've read in my years. Catherine Kuhlman, you know that name? You're saying yes.
Way back in the day.
That's why I could hardly. Yeah, it was bouncing around, but I got it. So yeah, Catherine Kuhlman, her story, intercessory prayer. There's prayer, and then there's intercessory prayer. Powerful. Anyway, so we answered that question. His character.
God also knew that Lot would come in handy later on with Sodom and Gomorrah,
Hmm.
he would be the key factor.
Yeah, you ever wonder that if God would have to, because of the reasons that he judged Sodom and Gomorrah, and yet we look around, do you ever wonder if he would have to, if he doesn't judge the other nations for some of the similar, that he's going to have to apologize to Sodom and Gomorrah?
That's what Hal Lindsey says. He's gonna have to apologize to the Great White Throne. You know, Sodom and Gomorrah, if he doesn't judge the United States. How many babies do we kill? 8,000 a year or something?
For over, right now, it's close to 5,000 a day.
A day?
Yeah.
Oh, wow.
Since Roe v. Wade in the early 70s, it's over 2 million. Anyway, question 5. When Abram, had obeyed God's first command, the Lord made another promise. What was it?
To your offspring, I will bring this land. I will give this land. To your offspring, I will give this land.
So let's look at Genesis 12:1, comparing it to Genesis 12:7. Genesis 12:1 says, "Go to a land I will show you." And in 7 it says, "And I will give you the land that you." So first he's going to show him, and now he says, "I'll give this to you." From show to give, from vision to inheritance. What happens in that interim? What is the process in the interim between the vision and the inheritance? Oftentimes. You said it earlier over here. You said it. Obedience. It's obedience. God promised land and descendants. How could Abram, then Abraham, how could he receive this promise from God of father of many nations? We don't even have kids. What are you talking about?
It's a God thing.
It is a God thing, but it's also a faith thing for Abram. So what is faith? What's the verse that tells us what faith is?
Yes.
Say it again, and then you say it. What?
Faith is the substance of things hoped for, believe in, evidence of things not seen.
Yeah, right? Faith is the substance of things hoped for and the evidence of things not seen. Also, that's Hebrews. So, just, what's the word? Man, I'm struggling today. I don't know why. Oh, maybe I took a decongestant this morning. Oh, blame it on that. Every week I have some excuse. But,
Rabbit trail.
yeah, I told Amy last night, I said, sometimes I like to pray. I love to pray, but there's just too many squirrels in my life. Try to pray, and I'm not praying for one full, I was going to say minute, but boy, that's a huge exaggeration. Maybe 5 or 10 seconds, and then all of a sudden I get attacked by these squirrels. Oh my gosh. I hope I'm not alone in that. Okay. Actually, I want to rephrase that. I know I'm not alone in that, but my hope for you is that you're not in that as deeply as I am. Prayer is awesome. Prayer is wonderful. So, Terah, and that's the father of Abram. What are some of, then we have Sarai. Her name was changed to Sarah, right? Who else is in that family tree?
Lot, unfortunately.
unfortunately.
right? But what about, so we got Abraham,
Oh,
yeah,
I can think of, you think of,
It's-
you're thinking of Abraham's offspring? His relatives, like his.
well, yeah, but to have
Abraham,
offspring,
Isaac, and Jacob.
yes, and that's his offspring through, so Abraham and Sarah, after her name was changed and she was able to have kids, right? But there are other offspring.
Moses, Moses.
Are you of Terah? You're talking about Terah? Offspring of Terah?
So Abraham, sorry, these questions aren't real good. Abraham had a wife, Sarah. God blessed them and gave them kids, right? Isaac and Jacob. So we know that, right? Then Hagar, the handmaiden. That's why Islam is declaring Abraham as the father of their religion as well. In fact, in the Quran, it was Abraham that was going to offer up Ishmael, not Isaac. So, just saying,
They're kind of half brothers according to.
yeah,
That's.
for sure. Who was, did Abraham have another wife? He had a handmaiden, Hagar.
After Sarah died.
Yes, that's,
What was her name?
Is it Rebecca?
Like,
No.
no,
No, it wasn't Rebecca.
Cameron.
yeah,
See you?
uh-huh.
Oh, I thought it was right behind us.
No, it's Keturah.
Sure.
Keturah, it's a second wife. Key child was Midian, had 5 other kids. Abraham was the father of many nations, no question about it. So in question 6, what character qualities does Abram display in Genesis 12, 10 through 13? For instance, does he show the faith in Hebrews 11:8? So what are the character qualities? We talked about some of those in a previous question. I didn't really like all the questions. How they were just so cursory and so remedial. And this is a repeat. So what character qualities does Abraham display in chapter 12? For instance, does he show the faith of Hebrews 11:8?
No.
Right there. I wrote no.
I did too, but no.
Right there. It says no. No, he doesn't. But so what do you want from this? So 3 things. He left the promised land. So he is listed as the heroes of faith in chapter 11 of Hebrews. But he lied about his wife.
Oh, yeah.
And he didn't get held accountable that we know.
Mm-hmm.
And it's not like the wife just sat around and cooked and ate.
Yeah.
It's very obvious what happened.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
And yet.
But it was his half sister, right?
It was a half truth.
Exactly. So you must have
That's what I
studied.
have down, a half.
It was only a half lie.
He was
But I
guilty.
had fear.
He was.
He followed his own plan.
Mm-hmm. He was guilty of deceit and manipulation.
He had trickery. I put trickery.
But not God. And that happens to all of us.
Isn't it?
Right?
Absolutely.
Like you talked about, I can have my good days and then my bad days. And I can trust God and go, okay, this is it. And then other times I don't think, I don't trust Him. It's like to do it my way. Or my way that I think should be done, which involves maybe not telling a whole truth or a half truth. And like you were saying, Kendall, sometimes I get called on that. And sometimes I escape by grace. Right? It's like, oh, okay, I know, I should have had more of a repercussion, but I didn't. And that to me is the grace of God. And was he still a man of faith? Absolutely.
Yeah.
Did he fail? Absolutely. And I think it's, I was reading something the other day. Sorry not to go off my foot. We were talking about life and all their journeys and disobedience and exile and all of this. And it talked about how we, as people, were real quick to say how they failed. But we really should be focusing on how faithful God was to continue to pursue them.
For grace.
And that really stuck with me, and I see that even here, right? He failed, and we know he's done this, he does this a couple of times,
hmm
right? Because he doesn't trust that God continues to come after, and I just love that. That is the God that we serve.
Well, I think that's the point in how these questions, although slow in getting us to there. So if we just jump over to question number 8, it summarizes exactly what you said. So could Abram's mistakes defeat God's plan? And how is this fact significant for us? So that's it. That's the answer. We just didn't get there yet, but we're there now. So the answer there, I wrote no as well. Could Abraham's mistakes defeat God's plan? No. Emphatically, no. Right here are my notes. I wrote it down in my own handwriting. No. God uses our mistakes to demonstrate his own reliability. Yeah.
I'm so glad to hear you say that. I make so many mistakes, and I don't want to, but I look back on my life and in spite of everything, the Lord still loves me.
Mm-hmm.
But I've made so many mistakes that I wish I hadn't have made. But you know, I decided to sweep them under the rug, and they're going to be as far. They're already not remembered by the Lord. Isn't God good?
Amen. There is now therefore no condemnation for those that are in Christ Jesus. In fact, those sins and those mistakes, how far away are they?
In the deepest. The east is from the west.
Yes.
Or is he-
Psalm 106 or 107, I forget, right? God removes our sins as far as the east is from the west. We all have that human error element in our lives. Every day. In fact, before this day's over, in fact, probably before you get from here into the sanctuary, just saying. So human error is a variability, for sure. It is one of the variables. But it does not affect the divine promise, because that is constant in our lives. Nothing I can do or you can do can deserve salvation. Forget about even just salvation. Nothing you do, have done, or will ever do can deserve God's favor on your life. Nothing. Okay, I've said this so many times. You should know this quote by heart. Jonathan Edwards, it's one of my favorites. The only thing that you have contributed to your salvation is what? The sin that made salvation necessary. Have you ever looked at the video? It's a reenactment. Jonathan Edwards. Sinners in the hand of an angry God. You ever heard that before? Okay, we're going to watch it next week. It's really, I just thought of it, and so I'm making a change on the fly. but it's the only sermon that is ever and has ever been taught in colleges and universities in America. This literary style, Sinners in the Hand of an Angry God. It's really good. Jonathan Edwards was one of my favorite, as I've said. He was called to substitute preach in this mega church way back in the 1700s. So we don't have videos of it. So there's a guy that does a reenactment. He's even got the white wig that they wore. And it's cool. But he was to give a substitutionary message. And he did. There were 500 people got saved.
Great.
Yeah. But it's taught in literary circles. That clock cannot be right.
It's right.
Oh.
You're gonna get in trouble.
I looked at that and, oh my goodness. Okay. Sorry.
Oh, man.
They made me do it. No. Sorry, we're done.
We'll take the blame.
Oh my. My eyesight's as bad as my memory. I kept looking at that and I thought, we have 10 more minutes. And then it didn't move.
You'll forgive me.
Wow.
Can we go?
Yes. Yes.
Apparently we're supposed to